Hello, YouTube. My name is Sammy, and welcome to Sammy's Workshops. I model an On30. That's 1/48 scale or O scale trains running on HO or a 30-inch gauge track. My good friend Calvin Witt, I'll put a link to his Etsy store and YouTube channel in the description down below, had the idea to make some laser-cut wood storefronts for smaller sized buildings in O scale. These could be used with our narrow gauge all the way up to 2-rail O scale, high rail, or even line L. He was building some that are easy to build and won't break the bank. Most O scale laser cut buildings start around $40 and go up really fast. Trying to make a credible looking small city or boom town could really break the bank. Calvin's buildings come originally as fronts only. With the addition of some short side walls or long side walls, you can make a building flat, a narrow depth, or even a full-size building. For my upcoming home layout, I wanted a two-sided town. One portion, a string of older wood buildings on either side of the street, depicting what was begun as a small boomtown mining town that survived into the next century, the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, where the newer buildings on the other part of town were made of brick. I get my basic brick building parts from another friend of mine for O scale, Tim Molina. We'll be doing a similar process to what I'm doing here with the wood buildings for those newer brick buildings in some future videos. Today's video is about how I take those basic building fronts, which would look amazing just painted as they are. However, by adding some strip wood, a little cardstock, and a few readily available details from a couple of manufacturers, we can make these buildings look very different, even though they may begin with the same basic storefront. So let's get started. At first, Calvin made a pair of building fronts, what I call the tall building and then the short building. Both actually have the same roof height. One was just straight across the top at the full height, and the other had two sides clipped down for a different looking shape, both of which are very standard for most any wood buildings that you would see in old towns between the 1830s through the turn of the century. And between the two of us, we'd figured out a few variations, so now he's got between 6 and 8 building front styles. I'm going to use almost all of them here. Today we'll only be doing the fronts or facades. In later buildings, I will flesh out those buildings for my town. Calvin's buildings are designed to use standard Tichy doors and windows, which helps keep the cost down and provides a wee bit of uniformity across our town. Most towns only had 1 or 2 finish carpenters, so there would be kind of a standardization of sorts based on the skills that they had. So let's start with this first pair. For these two, I started out rather simply, just adding several lengths of basswood, stripwood to the top edges. It only took 2 pieces of stripwood on each, and it really does change the looks of the buildings. Next up is another one of the center section building, the short one as I call it. On that one, I clipped the corners and I rearranged the cutoffs and reinforced the peak with some of this cardstock, both on the front and back of the building. I added flatwood and stripwood as on the prior buildings. Then I added some fish scales that I got from Grant Line San Juan Details to cover that peak triangle area. Really changes the look of the building. Then I did a tall square top, got stripwood across the top, added some dentals from Grant Line San Juan Details, and yet again another look for that one. The next pair of buildings were another tall square top and one that Calvin made with a porch roof. I trimmed most of the upper flat portion from above the porch roof and then added it to the tall square one to make it even taller. I wanted the look of almost a 2-story building here, and I think this one will give me just enough height for that. Probably a good place for an accountant or an attorney's office upstairs, maybe even a union hall. To the shorter building, I used some wide flat boards at a right angle, added some larger dental details from Grantline San Juan Details. I have a lot of their detail parts here. I bought a couple of their assortments a while back. Then a narrower flat board on the bottom, and glued this whole assembly to the porch roof building just above the porch roof. Really gives it a neat look, and it's not very tall. The building that I added the extra section to is now even taller. I added some cardstock to it since the wood for the building fronts was a slightly different thickness, which isn't really a problem because I used the cardstock to fill it out. Then I added a very wide cardstock strip at the top and some large corbels from the Grantline San Juan detail pile. Some flat, square, raised panels, and later on a multicolor paint job, and this building's going to look fabulous. A side view or two here show the layers built up to achieve the profile shape. A few more pieces of strip wood for the bottom of the cardstock trims out this decorative panel, and it's ready to go paint. For the next two building fronts, I got some help from Calvin again. He made the first, what I call the short building with the square center section. I asked him if he would round the top of it. It's a variation on that earlier building, like I said, just with a rounded top instead of the square. The sketch that Calvin sent me for the big round top building, oh my goodness sakes, I really loved it. Told him I gotta have a pair, one of each of them. The big round one I think is gonna have to become the saloon. Doesn't it look like one? Anyway, Calvin also included some laser-cut cardstock trim pieces for those curved tops. Making them by hand is entirely possible, but his laser cutter made them oh so nice and easy, and they match the edges perfectly. Still, you know me, I can't leave well enough alone, so out came some quilling paper strips. I get these on Amazon, and yep, I'll have a link to that pack down here. It came with 4 different widths, so you can use them for a multitude of things. Some people even make flowers from them, so don't toss out the extras yet. Might have to have some scenery stuff for that later. Anyway, a pair of these strips, the narrower ones were in red and the wider ones were in purple, glued on with some PVA. I think I used some Aleene's tacky glue for this. Added to the round tops, added another pair of shadow lines and gave it some more detail. All in all, I made 8 building fronts here, and no 2 look the same. The first pair I built a base for and started assembling them for a micro train layout I have in the works. Sort of a mini merchant's row is what I was calling them. I made my own sides and backs for them out of cardstock. At that time, all Calvin was making was just the building fronts. Now he makes the side and back walls and roof. The cool part is I suggested that he sell them separately as a mix and match. So if you just want to build building fronts, you can buy just the building fronts. If you want to build narrow buildings, you buy the narrow depth walls. If you need a full-size building standalone, he's got a full depth building there too. So only pay for what you need. Sounds like a TV commercial I've heard somewhere, doesn't it? Anyway, the first pair are painted, and I've got roofs made for them, and the next video in the series will actually be completing that pair. Then I will make some videos for completing out the other buildings. Here are the last 6 buildings, all lined up in a row. Not even painted, they do look good, in my humble opinion. I can't wait to see them all painted up and in place, but that'll be for another video. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe and share it with your friends. In the description down there is my Patreon page and a way to send some funds to the channel through PayPal. I appreciate all the help. I'm not paid by anyone. This is all paid for out of my pocket. So you get my opinions, not what somebody else is paying me to say. Thanks for coming by, and until next time, see ya.